All right, so for today we're looking at one problem, and we're going to look at it all four methods. What should happen when I solve the same problem four different ways? I should get the same answer. Every year I have students who are always amazed that they use different methods and they get the same answer. Yeah, good. Yeah, some people don't realize that, that should happen, okay? All right, but this is nice because now we kind of look at, how does each of these work, practice with all of our methods, because our test is next Wednesday and you'll have to do all the different methods. Okay, this idea that we're going to work with today also usually helps students when we have that last page of your test where I'm like, here's 6 problems, any method you want to solve them, but you have to use each method at least once. So you have to kind of figure out which methods work for which problems, because not every problem can be solved in every method. All right, so first method for this problem is factoring, solve by factoring. What's the first thing you do when you solve for factoring? Before GCF. Set it equal to 0. Okay, so we need to set it equal to 0 first. So I'd have to subtract the 57. So what? 2x squared. What's negative 15 minus 57? Good. Negative 72 equals 0. Now, we learned how to do something here recently that will tell me whether or not this factors. So I don't have to play around with it and try to see if it works. Does anybody remember what we just learned? We just went over it in homework today. Wow, nothing? The discriminant? Remember we just talked about that? Oh my gosh, we're in trouble. All right. Let's see how that works. The discriminant has to be what for it to be factorable? Positive and a square root. All right, so let's find the discriminant real quick. Remember, your discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So b squared, my b value is what? 0. So 0 squared minus 4 times my a, 2. My c, negative 72. Remember, it's got to be set equal to 0 to do the discriminant. All right, so somebody grab your calculator, type that in, and tell me what you get for your discriminant. Marcus? If you look up here, there's no plain x term. So if there isn't one, it's a 0. Did you get an answer, Maria? 576. That's my discriminant. Is 576 a perfect square? Yes, it is. 24 is the square root. All right, so since my discriminant is a positive perfect square, I know that it's factorable. Okay, so now I can make sure I can try to factor. Because what's going to happen, guys, you're going to have a page with 6 problems on it, and your review that I already gave you guys, that last page is set up just the same. So if you're looking at a page with 6 problems and you know they don't all factor, I don't want to waste my time trying to factor every single one if they don't factor. So you can quickly find the discriminant, positive perfect square, it should factor. Right? So if it's going to factor, what's the first thing we do to factor? GCF. What's your GCF? 2. All right, so let's take out a 2. What do we have left when we take out a 2? Good. Equals 0. So take out your 2. And now we're looking at, I only have 2 terms. What's the only way I can factor something with 2 terms? Good. The plus and minus, and you're just going to take the square roots. Are they both perfect squares? Yeah. So set up my parentheses. 1 plus, 1 minus, square root of x squared, square root of 36. So what factors x plus 6, x minus 6? Okay, and then how do I actually solve it? Perfect. Set it equal to 0. So x plus 6 equals 0. X minus 6 equals 0. So subtract the 6. X equals negative 6. Add the 6. So x equals 6 and negative 6. Just coming back to us. I know it's been a couple days since we've done a lot of factoring. All right, how about the square root method? What must be missing in order to do the square root method? The b term has to be missing. Are you missing the b term? Yeah. So, okay. So let's do the square root method. What do you do for that method? Set it equal to 0 or no? No, I want to isolate. Yep, you got to get the x squared by itself. All right, so there was the original problem. If I'm trying to get the x squared by itself, what? Good. Let's add the 15. So we get 2x squared equals 72. Then divide by 2. I can't square root yet. I got to get the squared term by itself. So x squared equals 36. Now we can take the square root. What's the square root of 36? Plus or minus 6. Oh, same answer. Did I mess up somewhere? That shouldn't happen, right? Should totally happen. It's the same problem. I'm solving it different ways. All right, between those two methods, what would probably be your preferred choice? Square root method. It's way faster, right? Way faster. All right, how about completing the square? What must you have in order to complete the square? You have to have a bx. Do you have a bx? Nope. So can you solve this using that method? Nope. Can't do it. All right, how about quadratic formula? Yeah, I can set it equal to 0, which I did right here, so I'll save myself some time. So 2x squared minus 72 equals 0. All right, so let's plug stuff into our formula. So x equals, what's your b value? 0 plus or minus square root b squared, so 0 squared, minus 4 times my a, my c, negative 72, all over 2 times a. All right, help me out here, guys. What do we get underneath that radical? 0 plus or minus radical. Should you already have known that it was 576? Didn't we find that earlier? That was b squared minus 4ac. I already found it. All right, square root of 576? It's 24. No, it should be positive. Did you type in 0 squared minus, did you type the whole thing in? Was that, oh yeah, meaning that's what you did wrong? Oh, okay. All right, so 0 plus or minus 24 over 4. Divide all three numbers. I can divide them all by 4. Right, look at, don't let the 0 throw you. Divide them all by 4. So x equals, what's 0 divided by 4? 0. Plus or minus 24 divided by 4? 6 over 1. I don't really need it. What's 0 plus or minus 6? Plus or minus 6. I don't really need the 0, but you still need that plus or minus sign. Because I should get 2 answers. All right, so I got the same answer. I did it 3 different ways. What's your preferred method now? Still the square root method. I agree with you. Still the square root method. All right, so we only could do 3 of the methods. Will I ever be able to do all 4 methods on one problem? Why not? Good. Yeah, the square root method and completing the square, the two that had the word square in their name, one has to have a b and one has to be missing the b. So I can't ever do all the methods. Okay? All right, what about factoring? Can I always do this? Can you always factor? What? How do I know if it factors? Your discriminant has to be perfect square, positive perfect square. If it's not, it won't factor. Absolutely. That's what I would do. That way I don't waste my time trying to factor it if it doesn't actually factor. Yeah, I'd find the discriminant, be like, oh, nope, not a positive perfect square. Nope, can't do that one. Moving on. Because this is fast to find. That's just typing buttons in your calculator. Okay. Can I always do the quadratic formula? Yeah, that one will always work. That's why a lot of times students, when they have a choice, they'll go straight to that because they know it always works. But is it always the fastest? No, square root method was way faster. You're right, it's not terrible, but is it the fastest? No. Okay, try the next page. X squared minus 4x minus 45 equals 0. All right, so can it factor? How do I check it? Discriminant, right? So b squared minus 4 times a times c. The discriminant's just the part under the radical. What do you get for the discriminant? 196? Is 196 a positive perfect square? Yes, it is. It's 14. So that means it is factorable. All right, so let's factor it. So I'll write out my original problem so we can see it. All right, is there a GCF? No GCF this time. Set up your parentheses. Your last one's negative, so what are your signs? Positive, negative, they're opposite. Options for A. X and X. Gotta like those when there's not many options, right? X minus 9 and X plus 5. Very good. So your options for C would be 9 and 5, and he is correct. All right, how do I solve? Set them equal to 0. So X plus 5 equals 0. X minus 9 equals 0. So we get X equals negative 5, and X equals positive 9. Good. So how was factoring on this one? Very bad? No, it's not too bad. In this case, factoring was pretty fast. All right. How about the square root method? Why? There's a bx. Good. Can't do it. There's a bx term. So if I can't do square roots, can I complete the square? Yeah. All right. So if I'm going to complete the square, what's your first step? Set equal to 0 or no? No. Good. So you want the x stuff on one side, and you want to move the c value to the other. Okay. Your next step is divide by a. Do I have an a to divide by? No, I don't have to worry about that step. Then I have my b over 2. So 4 divided by 2 squared 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Why do I do that? What's my point? They have to be balanced. And then why do I do it in the first place, though? Just because I like to add stuff to my problems? What's your next step? Factor. I do that so it does factor. Otherwise, it won't factor perfectly. How does it factor? Good. X minus 2. Right, there's your minus. There's the 2 squared equals 49. Then we'll do the square root. Plus or minus 7. Good. So move the 2 over. So we get 2 plus or minus 7. I have two answers. What's 2 plus 7? 2 minus 7, negative 5. So completing the square. That wasn't too bad, right? There's no fractions in it. If you had a choice between factoring or completing the square, what would you choose? So would I. Factoring was way faster. Quadratic formula? Can I use that method? Yeah, you can always use quadratic formula. Good. This is one that you want set equal to 0, which the original problem actually was for us. So x equals negative b. Good. Positive 4. Plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Yeah, she's like, wait, we already know that. We did it right there. So 4 plus or minus radical 196 all over 2. Square root of 196, 14 all over 2. Can I divide all three numbers? Yep. Right, all three can be divided by 2. So we get x equals what? 7. So then x equals the same thing. Look, we stopped right here on this one. So 9 and negative 5. Oh, you darn thing. There we go. So again, we just looked at it 3 different methods. Which is your preferred choice? Factoring. Yeah, it'd be my choice too. All right, isn't that weird though? Like the first problem, your choice was square root method. Wasn't factoring in that one. But yeah, on this one definitely I would go with factoring. All right, so let's kind of recap a little bit. So we have completing a square and square roots. Can I ever do them both? No, I can always do one or the other. Which ones are the two that you do not set equal to 0? These two are the ones that we don't set equal to 0, right? Get the squared term by itself, move my c value. So the two that have the word square in the title are the two that you do not set equal to 0. They're the two that you can either do one or the other. The other two, factoring and quadratic formula, you set them equal to 0, right? Can I always use quadratic formula? Yes. Can I always factor? No, not always. All right, so just trying to get some things in your head of keeping all this straight, right? The ones that have the word square in them do not set equal to 0. The other two you do. All right, 2x squared plus 13x plus 21 equals 0. All right, so what's the first thing we want to check? The discriminant. So I want to see if it factors. I mean, that's got some options of number. I don't want to mess with it if I don't have to. So my discriminant, b squared minus 4 times a times c. I get what? 1? So will it factor? Is 1 a positive perfect square? Yeah, what's the square root of 1? 1. Okay, so yes, it will factor. All right. 2x squared plus 13x plus 21. All right, so if it will factor, is there a GCF? No, there's not. All right, so we set up our parentheses. Last one's positive. What are my signs? They're the same, so they are both plus. Options for a, 1 and 2, so 1x and 2x. Options for 21. So we have 1 and 21 or 7 and 3. You guys want to go with which option? 7 and 3. In that order, 7 and 3? Or 3 and 7? With the 2, I need the 7. And again, we can check this, right? That would give me 6x. That gives me positive 7x. Remember how we got to check those, right? We just can't throw the numbers in there and hope it works. Some of you, I think, do that. So don't stop. Check those. All right, so then we set them equal to 0. And we solve. So x equals negative 3. And x equals negative 7 over 2. Are we starting to get to the point where you can solve these without writing anything down? Like once you factored, you can be like, right, there's my factored, there's my answers. In chapter 5, as we get into that in the next couple weeks, I'm hoping you can go from here to here without writing anything down, because that will really make that chapter go a lot smoother for you. All right, so there's factoring. Was it bad? That wasn't terrible. All right, how about square root method? Why not? It's got a b term, right? B term, can't do this. All right, how about completing the square then? Yeah, it's got a b term, so I can do it. What do you do first? Equal to 0 or no? No. So let's move the c value. 2x squared. Good. Get the x stuff on one side. Let's move the c, so it becomes negative 21. Then what do I do? Divide by 2. So x squared plus, oh, everybody's excited, 13 over 2x equals negative 21 over 2. Look at those fractions. Isn't that beautiful? All right, so I moved my C, I divided by A. What's next? 13 over 2 divided by 2 is, would be 13 over 4. And then we square that. What's 13 squared? 13 times 13 is 169 over 16. Yeah, you multiplied by 2. So be careful. Plus 169 over 16. Oh, this problem gets better and better. But you're happy I let you use a calculator, right? You'd be in trouble if I didn't. All right, let's factor this. How does it factor? We can do this one without a calculator. X. Good. Right, there's your plus. There's your 13 over 4. Equals 1 over 16. You guys confirm? Okay. Then what? Square roots. Fractions, remember top, bottom separately. So we get x plus 13 over 4 equals square root of 1, square root of 16. Don't forget, plus or minus. Get x by itself. X equals negative 13 over 4 plus or minus 1 over 4. Keep going, right? So again, let's practice this, make sure we're good here. So since they're both over 4, what's negative 13 plus 1? It's negative 12 over 4. It's negative 3. You guys got quiet on me. That's frightening. Negative 13 minus 1. It's negative 14 over 4. Simplify. Negative 7 over 2. And it is the same answers we got up top when we did it by factoring. Let's see your answers. When you divide by 2, you're actually just multiplying the bottom by 2. You can type it in your calculator too. All right. How was that method? You choose to factor or complete the square? Yeah, I'd factor too. That got real ugly. It's doable. It just wasn't pretty. Quadratic formula? Can I use that method? Yeah, I can always use that method. So x equals negative b, negative 13, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Do we already know what's under the radical? 1. We found it with our discriminant. Over 4. What's the square root of 1? Over 4. Negative 13 plus 1. It's negative 12 over 4. It's negative 3. Negative 13 minus 1. It's negative 14 over 4. Simplify. Negative 7 over 2. Helps when we already knew the answers, right? How was quadratic formula? Wasn't bad, right? What's your preferred method? Factoring. All right. So overall, what do you think would be, if possible, your first choice to solve? Square root method probably be my overall first choice. And then next your choice would be factoring. And then after that, what? You'd rather complete the square than, yeah? Or quadratic formula? I think it probably depends on your preference. If you have a fraction, it got real ugly, right? It got a lot of variables in there, right? It just kind of depends what's going on. All right, last one. Let me give you guys some time. I want you to try all 4 methods, figure out which methods work, which ones don't, and try to get your answers, okay? I'll give you guys some time. It does. All right, guys, let's take a look at the problem. What was the first thing you looked for to find? The discriminant, right? Because the discriminant is going to tell you whether or not it can factor. Vanessa, put it away. All right, so the discriminant is going to be your b squared minus 4 times a times c. And what do we get for the discriminant? Negative 96. So what must the discriminant be in order for it to factor? Positive perfect square, and that is neither positive nor a perfect square, so it's wrong on all accounts. So I know it doesn't factor. I don't even have to waste my time trying. Okay. So can I do the square root method? No, why not? It's got to be x. It's got to be missing the bx for that to work. All right, so look at that, we're half done. All right, completing the square. So the first thing we want to do is move our c value to the other side. So I'm going to add the 20. And then we have to divide by a, so negative 2. Watch your signs here. So we get negative, what am I doing? Hold on. My brain got real excited to cancel things out there. So we have an x squared minus 4x equals negative 10. No fractions. You guys got real excited, right? Then your b over 2, so 4 divided by 2 squared. So we're going to add 4. All right, so it factors to x minus 2 squared equals negative 6 square root. So x minus 2 equals plus or minus I radical 6. Move the 2. So 2 plus or minus I radical 6. Did you know from the very beginning of this that your answer was going to have an I in it? What was negative? Yeah, the discriminant was negative, so you should have recognized, hey, I'm going to have an I in my answer. I saw at least one person walking around did not have an I in your answer, yet your discriminant was negative 96. Okay, that's kind of a nice little check on that. See, your discriminant's negative, you know you're going to have two imaginary answers. Plus or minus makes it 2, and you have the I. All right, quadratic formula. So x equals negative b, negative 8, plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c, which we already know all of that, right? 2 times a. So we get negative 8 plus or minus radical negative 96 all over negative 4. How did you simplify your radical? 16 and 6, so 4i radical 6 over negative 4. All right, all three numbers. Why did you know to divide by a negative 4? Because the bottom was negative. Yeah, if the bottom's negative, you got to divide by that. So negative 8 divided by negative 4, plus or minus. Do I need to put another negative sign? I already got both covered. I'm good. So I have I radical 6, and that's just over 1. So we got the same answer. Which method did you prefer on this one? Quadratic, and somebody else preferred completing the square. Honestly, a lot of times it's a toss-up between those two methods. They're both long. All right, let's take a quick brain break. Just did. All right, so guys, we need to have kind of a plan of attack when it comes to that last page of our test, right? Because you have to use each method. I know you don't like to use each method, but we need to use them all at least once. So the first thing I would look for, what did we talk about was your preferred method, which is usually the easiest and fastest. The square root method. So first thing you want to look for is the square root method. How do you know if you can use the square root method? Not perfect square. There's no bx. All right, so guys, make a note of this because this is going to help you out on that last page of your test next week. I haven't decided yet. All right, so guys, square root method, also you want to look for that not only because we like it, it's the easiest, but chances are not many of them will be missing the bx term. Okay, so you want to make sure we look for that first. So no bx. All right, what's probably the next thing you want to look for? Ones that will factor, because not everything factors. All right, so next I would look for ones that factor. How do you know which ones factor? The discriminant. Discriminant is a positive perfect square. All right, so guys, I would look for square root method first, find the problems that don't have a bx term, do those first. Okay? Then I would go back and I would look at which one will factor. Okay, so I'm finding my discriminant. If it's a positive perfect square, I know it factors, and I can go ahead and factor those. Okay, after that, it's kind of a toss-up between you guys which method you prefer. Some of you, I think, prefer completing the square over quadratic formula. It doesn't matter to me which method you use, but I would probably look for my next choice. I might look for completing the square. As a suggestion, because you're trying to sometimes avoid those ugly fractions, maybe look for one. So maybe look for a problem without an a value. Because if I don't have to divide everything by a, chances are my problem's going to be a lot nicer looking. Right? That'll probably give me nice ones. And then look for the quadratic formula after that. Because what do we know about quadratic formula? It works for everything. Yep, so works for everything. So in other words, as I'm looking through all these problems, I know if I look for the ones without a bx, I'll get the square root method done off my plate. Okay, I'm going to look for the discriminant being a positive perfect square. I know I can factor that because not everything factors. Completing the square, as long as it has a b term, it's going to work, but sometimes they get ugly. So maybe look for ones without an a value. Sometimes I don't have to divide by a and get an ugly fraction with. And then everything else, I might just do the quadratic formula. Okay, again, totally up to you when it comes to that part of your test, but you have to use each method at least once. Each method at least once. The other problems, whatever your preferred method is. Okay?